So, why was Williamsburg, Brooklyn great in the 2010s? I think if I could boil it down to one word, the best word that I can think of is freedom. The opportunities seemed endless to learn, to be, become something, to experience new things, to meet people from all over the world. It seemed like it was all there in the 2010s. Um, I'll give an example. The Williamsburg Bridge. That's the bridge that connected the Lower East Side of Manhattan Island to Williamsburg. One of my earliest memories of Brooklyn in the 2010s is when I used to walk or jog on this bridge. And it was just different from all the other bridges in New York City. And there's quite a few in New York because there's a lot of different sections of New York City, and Manhattan is an island, so it needs a few. And let's even between Brooklyn and Queens, there's a bridge, the Kosciuszko Bridge. Anyway, so I used to walk on the Williamsburg Bridge, and it just kind of symbolized all of this for me. Now, when you walked on the bridge at that time, and possibly to some extent now, it was just full of graffiti. Just over the years, people had just spray painted things all over it. And this wasn't really that common in New York City by that time. Graffiti was all over the city in the 80s, but was kind of there was a crackdown on it later on. But anyway, the Williamsburg Bridge was just full of graffiti, people just writing random weird things all over the pavement on it. And it was this kind of weird orange pink color, if I remember right. That was different. And when I would walk from Brooklyn to Manhattan, you would see just all these classic signs of like an artist neighborhood. You would see people had like rooftop canopies where they would have parties, and there were all these old apartments that were just stacked close together. And sometimes at night you would see people there. You'd see people outside milling about, having parties, having drinks, playing music. And this this was right next to the bridge too. So as you were walking to Manhattan, you would catch glimpses of all of this, like all these little slices of life that were going on around you, and the vibrancy of the neighborhood. So it was, and I'd see it as you walked up the span, and then as you went down the span back to Manhattan, and there was all the endless, glam and opportunity and and just everything Manhattan had to offer too, which was just so much at that time as well. So it was there were so many great things going on. Like I mentioned earlier, before I started out going to bars on Grand Street, specifically the Trash Bar, and there were these great shows there. I would catch like the punk rock shows, and they were just a lot of times local bands or bands traveling through, and there would be slam dancing, mosh pits, people just throwing things at the stage. The guys on stage, I think, would throw things back, and Nobody was really taking anything that seriously. A lot of times in these punk rock shows, you could barely make out what they were saying, but they were so much fun. Often the crowd would be involved with the audience, and then you'd go outside and there would be people there from the neighborhood, and you could chill out with them, talk with them. Most were very friendly. Sometimes then I would like go out to Bedford Avenue and go to some other places there. It would go on till the early morning hours. Just just people just having fun. Oh, and there was like this weird flea market on Bedford Avenue by Metropolitan at the time. It was like a sidewalk flea market, and it was cool. There was this, yeah, as I mentioned before, like the vintage markets that were going on there, thrift stores, people selling old stuff. Um, and then there was the scene that I was a part of at the Third Ward, which was East Williamsburg or Bushwick, kind of like in between those two neighborhoods, and just really me and just hundreds of people just doing all kinds of things: art, cooking, crafts, woodworking. It was all going on there. They used to have like in the summer like a big party with like I think they had like a pig on a spit. I never actually went to it because it didn't really sound that appetizing to me. Something like that. But yeah, I remember like being around there when it was going on, and just seeing like hundreds of people just walking around, just enjoying these summer parties. That reminds me too. There was really a great thing was the rooftop parties in Brooklyn. I mean, these were just the best. You would just be on some 3 or 4 story building and watch the sunset over Brooklyn, over Queens, over Manhattan. Like 4th of July, you would see fireworks going on around you. Went to quite a few of these, and it just always had a very relaxing atmosphere. People would bring food, bring drinks. They were the best. If anything, definitely one of the top things I miss is the rooftop parties. I'm sure that is something that still goes on, not unique to the 2010s, but maybe it had that particular flavor, when there was that generation coming in the early part of the century and the 2010s. It was just awesome. What else? I mentioned, I can't remember there was the name of it was like the first big nightclub to open up in North Brooklyn. I can't remember what it was called. Like, it was on Wythe Avenue, but that was a big deal at that time. I mentioned it was Music Hall of Williamsburg. It was on like North 6th Street or something like that. And there were just a lot of fun shows going on there. Just and a lot of people in their 20s and 30s just moved to the city and just doing whatever they wanted to do. You could pursue anything there. If you wanted to work on Wall Street, you could do that, and you could or you could try your hand as an artist. There was they'd have these open galleries at times, which was really cool. I don't remember if there was one in Williamsburg, but there definitely was in Bushwick and Greenpoint. Like sometimes these artists would just have like a home studio, and they just open it up, and you could just walk in and just look at their stuff. Was really great. Like I said, there was McCarran Park. I never got to catch any of the shows when they had concerts right in the what was then the former city pool of in McCarran Park. But that was definitely like I think a mainstay of that time. Um, uh, there was the whole hipster thing was going on way through the 2000s and into as you could say, the early part of the 2010s. That was just a really big deal, the hipster. So this was basically like, the kid who moved to Williamsburg at that time, was, probably from some other state or maybe New Jersey or, somewhere. I mean, even some of them were probably from the city. And it's kind of a thing that was hard to describe, but you knew it when you saw it. They just kind of had maybe thrift store clothes, mismatched maybe, like some kind of weird hat or sunglasses. I mean, they just stood out. I mean, you had, like I said, Williamsburg, the original residents. You have the Hasidic Jews who had their own style of dress. You had Puerto Ricans, and they, did not look or dress like them. And, the Italians who were just, I guess most of them that I saw at that time were like in their, at least 50s or 60s, if not older. So these new residents, I mean, I guess you could, one thing across the board is that they were generally young, in their 20s or 30s, out of college, probably college educated or something like that, or art school or something. And, you know what, it seemed like they were usually thin for some reason, girls and guys, just, most of them just, for whatever reason, seemed to be thin. And, you just kind of knew it when you saw it, they'd be from anywhere, but, they were people who you just got the sense they were maybe, kind of artsy, trying to stand out from the crowd, have their own kind of style. And I guess one of the cliches was that people would say that, well, by them, trying to stand out and have their own style, they actually all started to look the same in a way, which was kind of true, I guess, ironically. And irony was supposedly a big aspect of the hipster, that they just were into irony and were sarcastic. And there was definitely derogatory things said about them and their personalities, that they were music snobs, which that I could see. I generally found true. They're into, they were kids who into the Cure, the Smiths, stuff like that, and liked obscure music, especially, would possibly thumb their noses at popular music. I wouldn't say it was especially political at that time when I got there. Generally, I didn't feel a lot of people were talking about politics that much. That's one aspect of it. So that's about what I can say about what made Williamsburg great at that time. I suppose I caught the tail end of it in 2010, 2011, 2012. Really, that crowd started to get older, get married, have kids, towards the middle, the end part of the decade. And the new generation started to move further into Bushwick and, I guess Bushwick, Bushwick really became like the, kind of like the new place for the next generation of artsy transplants, hipsters, whatever you want to call them. Definitely towards the end of the decade, as Williamsburg, like I said, just the development was huge and became more high end, became more of a place for professionals, less for artists. Towards the end of the decade, it was a really a great place to be when it had its time. You got any questions about it? Want me to talk about any other aspects? let me know. Give me a thumbs up. Bye.